I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind outside had me leaping up and checking the windows. My trees, the towering giants I once admired at sunrise, were gone. The silence on that side of the house now felt loud, haunting. The next morning I was at the county office as soon as the doors opened. Kevin waved me in before the line even started. "You're not going to believe this," he said, sliding a folder across his cluttered desk. Inside were copies of documents supposedly signed by my uncle, dated 2 months after his official death certificate. His shaky signature was there on each page, a supposed agreement to transfer a slice of his land to Copper Valley HOA for community expansion and recreation. "They even notarized this one," Kevin pointed, grimacing. "But the notary listed on here, she passed away 3 years ago." I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. "They forged everything." Kevin nodded. "Looks like someone submitted fake documents to our office just days after the property was in probate. Because your uncle's passing didn't trigger a red flag in our system immediately, the forged paperwork went through before your inheritance was finalized. It's sneaky. Real sneaky. So what do I do now? You'll need a land use attorney fast before they break more ground. If they build something on the land, it'll complicate things legally." That wasn't even the worst part. Kevin leaned in, voice low. "There's a hearing scheduled next week. The HOA filed for a full property review. They're trying to claim you're illegally squatting." I stared at him, stunned. "They're saying I'm the trespasser?" "If they succeed, they'll try to void your deed, especially if they make it look like your uncle sold this portion of the land willingly." It felt like a nightmare with no end. I drove back home numb, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Every wooden stake with those stupid orange flags felt like a knife in my ribs. But by the time I pulled into my gravel driveway, I had made up my mind. If they wanted a war, I was going to give them one. The first thing I did was call my old friend Benji Myers, who'd gone to law school with me years ago before I left the legal world to work in finance. Benji now specialized in land disputes. "Tell me this is a joke," he said after I filled him in. "I wish it was." He promised to fly out that weekend. Said he wanted to walk the property himself. "I've seen HOA power grabs, but forging dead men's signatures, that's federal fraud. If we can prove it, they're done." But I didn't even get to the weekend. 2 nights later, I came home from running errands in town and noticed something strange. My fence gate was open. I never left it open. When I pulled up the drive, I saw tire tracks that weren't mine, deep ones heading toward the back barn, and then I heard it, banging, clanging, and voices. I jumped out of the truck and sprinted down the gravel trail. 2 men in work uniforms were pulling down the wooden fencing near the back pasture. Another was loading materials into a trailer. "Hey," I roared, storming up to them. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" They froze, and the older guy stepped forward, calm as ever. "HOA demolition orders. You've got illegal livestock barriers extending into protected park planning zones. This is my ranch. Sir, please calm down." "No, you're trespassing." I whipped out my phone and started recording. "You touch anything else and I'm calling the sheriff. Get off my property." The man held up his clipboard and tapped it smugly. "We have full legal authorization to be here." "You better have that notarized by a ghost, because everything you've touched is based on fake documents. Now leave." He hesitated, but eventually they packed up and drove off, leaving a mess behind. Half-torn fencing, scattered tools, and my fury boiling just beneath the surface. That night I posted the footage online with a short caption. HOA, trying to steal my land. I'm not even in the HOA. They forged paperwork after my uncle died. This is war. The video went viral overnight. By the next morning, it had 1.2 million views. Comments were flooding in. "This is criminal. You better sue them into the ground. We need more people like you to stand up to these tyrants. Name and shame. Expose the board." And then the news truck showed up. I was sipping coffee on my porch when a white van rolled up with the words Channel 12 Investigates on the side. A young reporter named Rachel Hart stepped out with a cameraman, polite but clearly excited. "I saw your post. Mind if we talk?" I gave her the full story. The trees, the forged documents, the fines, the crew tearing down my fence, everything. She asked if she could walk the property with me and film a few segments. I agreed. It felt good to be heard, to finally have people watching. But then came the letter. While Rachel was filming near the old barn, my mailbox clanked shut. I walked over and pulled out a fresh white envelope. No stamp, just sealed and tucked in. I opened it. Notice of immediate property seizure. Copper Valley HOA Enforcement Department. Due to continued violation of HOA ordinances and refusal to comply with outlined fines, the Copper Valley HOA has enacted emergency measures to seize and secure Parcel 13B, effective immediately. I reread it twice. My hands trembled. They were going to try to take my home, the land, the barns, the house, everything, and they were coming fast. I ran back to the porch, heart racing, mind spinning. Rachel saw my face and turned off the camera. What happened? I handed her the letter. Her eyes widened. This can't be legal. No, but they're going to try it anyway. Just then, the sound of engines roared from the road. I turned around. 3 black trucks with Copper Valley logos on the side were heading up my driveway fast. And behind them, a tow truck with chains. They weren't waiting for permission. They were coming to take it all right now. And I had seconds to decide what to do next. I didn't wait. As the first black truck rumbled to a stop just feet from my porch, I bolted into the house, yanked open the gun cabinet, and grabbed the first thing I saw. My granddad's old hunting rifle. I wasn't planning to use it, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let them think I'd just roll over. I stepped out with it slung across my back, hands visible, and stood firm on the porch. The engines idled, doors opened. Out stepped Robert Finch, the smug HOA president, with 2 security guys and 1 woman in a blazer. A moment later, the tow truck backed toward my barn, and another man jumped out with bolt cutters heading for the livestock gate. I shouted, "You step any further and you'll be dealing with the sheriff." Finch raised his hand slowly, feigning calm. "Mr. Colby, this doesn't need to escalate. We're simply here to execute a lawful seizure." "You mean the one based on documents signed by a dead man?" He gave a fake chuckle. "You're mistaken. Everything is recorded properly with the county. Yeah, you might want to check again because the county clerk already flagged it. Fraud, forgery, criminal intent, the whole damn file is tainted." His smirk cracked for a second. "I'll give you one warning," I growled, stepping forward, rifle still strapped but firm on my shoulder. "Leave my property now or I call the sheriff. And trust me, this time I'm pressing charges." Rachel was still there filming from the side. Her cameraman zoomed in on every move. The crew hesitated. Finch turned to his team and gave a quick nod. "Back it up." They didn't argue. One by one, they climbed into their trucks. The tow guy the last to go, throwing the bolt cutters back into his rig like a defeated child. Within 2 minutes, they were gone. I collapsed into a porch chair, heart pounding so hard I thought it would punch through my ribs. Rachel walked over, stunned. "I've seen a lot doing this job, but that was wild." "Welcome to rural HOA warfare," I muttered. The footage she captured aired the next day, and everything exploded. The segment ran on the 6 p.m. news under the title, "HOA tries to seize ranch from non-member. Backlash grows." Viewers flooded the station with support. Local newspapers picked it up. Online forums lit up with outrage. Lawyers, veterans, ranchers, and even HOA survivors came out of the woodwork with offers to help. Benji finally arrived that Saturday, straight from the airport, briefcase in hand and fire in his eyes. "Let's burn these bastards to the ground," he said without even saying hello. We sat at my dining table and built our case. Kevin, the county clerk, agreed to testify. Rachel gave us her raw footage, and we even found an elderly notary who confirmed her stamp had been stolen years ago, the same one used on the fake transfer. Things were finally shifting, but peace never lasts long on this ranch. A few days later, I was walking along the tree line at the edge of my property with Benji, showing him where the boundary stakes used to be. The air was cool, birds chirping like nothing had ever gone wrong. We were hopeful. It felt like, for once, we had them cornered. That's when we saw the ditch. A wide, deep trench had been dug across the edge of the pasture. It ran clean through my southern boundary and stopped just a few feet from my main irrigation pipe. Fresh tire tracks lined the sides, and in the middle of it all, an enormous cement foundation was being poured. There were no workers, no machinery, just the structure already taking shape. Benji's jaw dropped. They're building now. No permits, no notice, just doing it. I walked closer and spotted the same red plastic flag staked into the ground with a sign beside it. Copper Valley Community Pavilion. Coming soon. I couldn't breathe. They weren't just trying to take my land. They had already started. Benji took pictures, cursed under his breath, and pulled out a... The news coverage continued. More articles, more social media buzz. People were starting to call the HOA the Copper Valley land grabbers. The pressure was building. But the HOA didn't disappear. They just got sneakier. A few days later I started getting official-looking notices in the mail. Not from the HOA this time, but from various county departments. Notices about code violations on my property. My barn was structurally unsound according to one notice. My fence line was too close to a protected wetland, according to another, even though the wetland was just a low spot that collected rainwater. Every single notice was complete nonsense, clearly fabricated to harass me. Benji just added them to our growing pile of evidence. They're trying to bury you in paperwork, he said, shaking his head. Make it too expensive and too much of a headache to fight. Then came the anonymous threats, emails with no sender, just menacing messages. Drop the lawsuit. You're messing with the wrong people. Things happen to people who don't know their place. I ignored them. They were trying to scare me, and I wouldn't let them. One evening, as the sun was setting, I was checking on Earl's temporary water line. I heard a car slow down on the road. It was a sleek black SUV I didn't recognize. It stopped, and the passenger, window rolled down. A woman with sharp features and an even sharper voice called out, "Mr. Colby?" I walked over cautiously. "Who are you?" "I'm representing the Copper Valley HOA," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness. "We'd like to discuss a settlement." I crossed my arms. "I'm not selling, and I'm not dropping the lawsuit." She smiled, a thin, humorless smile. "Perhaps you haven't fully considered the implications of continuing this. Lawsuits are expensive and things can become very difficult for you." It was a veiled threat. I just stared at her. "My lawyer handles all communications. You can talk to him." Her smile vanished. "This is your last chance to resolve this amicably." "Then I guess there's nothing more to discuss." I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting in the SUV. As I walked back towards the house, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They were escalating. The threats, the fake violations, the attempts to buy me off. They weren't just trying to steal my land anymore, they were trying to break me. But seeing Earl and his hands working in the mud, seeing the outpouring of support online, it reminded me I wasn't alone. And sometimes, all it takes is one person standing firm to expose a rot that runs deep. And I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, that I was that person. The gavel struck, a sharp, decisive sound that echoed in the suddenly silent courtroom. Judge Thompson, her voice firm and unwavering, continued to lay out her findings. She didn't just find for me. She condemned the HOA's actions with a righteous indignation that sent a chill through the air. The land transfer documents, she reiterated, were not just flawed, they were a fabrication, a blatant attempt to defraud Mr. Colby of his rightful property. She detailed the evidence, the missing county records, the forged signatures, the coerced notary's testimony, the sheer absurdity of a legally executed transfer being handled with such clandestine haste. The judge's gaze swept across the courtroom, landing for a moment on Finch, who now looked less like a powerful developer and more like a cornered rat. Furthermore, she continued, her voice rising slightly, the actions taken by the Copper Valley Homeowners Association, including the unauthorized construction on Mr. Colby's land, and the deliberate destruction of his essential infrastructure constitute a pattern of harassment and intimidation designed to force Mr. Colby from his home and livelihood. This court will not tolerate such behavior. She ordered the immediate removal of the concrete foundation, specifying that the cost and responsibility lay solely with the HOA. "This eyesore," she declared, gesturing towards a large printed photograph of the foundation displayed on an easel, "is a monument to the defendant's malice and must be eradicated without delay." She ordered the HOA to pay for the full repair and replacement of my irrigation system, including any temporary measures taken, like Earl's lifeline. The damages awarded for emotional distress and business disruption were substantial, a figure that made even Benji raise his eyebrows slightly. It wasn't about getting rich. It was about sending a message. The referral to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution felt like the final nail in the coffin for Finch and his cohorts. The possibility of jail time for fraud and property damage was a far cry from their initial vision of a lucrative land grab. As the judge finished and the bailiff called the next case, a ripple of murmuring spread through the packed courtroom. Supporters, neighbors, and even some curious onlookers who had followed the news were buzzing. Finch and his lawyer huddled together, their faces a mask of disbelief and fury. Stepping out of the courthouse was like emerging from a dark tunnel into the bright sunlight. The air was crisp and clean. A crowd had gathered on the steps, not just Earl and his friends, but people I barely knew holding signs that read, "Colby's land, Colby's home," and "Justice for the rancher." The applause and cheers were overwhelming. People wanted to shake my hand to offer words of encouragement, to share their own stories of dealing with difficult HOAs or feeling powerless against larger forces. Rachel and her cameraman were right there, thrusting a microphone in front of my face. "Mr. Colby, how do you feel about the judge's ruling?" she asked, her eyes shining with genuine excitement. I took a deep breath, the weight of the past few months finally starting to lift. "Relieved," I said, my voice a little shaky. "And grateful. Grateful for my lawyer, for my neighbors, for everyone who stood by me." I gestured to the crowd. This wasn't just my fight. It was a fight for what's right, for the little guy against the big guys who think they can just take what they want. Earl stepped forward, putting a hand on my shoulder. "That's right," he boomed. "They messed with the wrong rancher and the wrong community." The news coverage that followed was extensive. My story became a symbol of resistance against corporate overreach and the importance of community solidarity. Articles appeared in newspapers across the state, and I even did a few radio interviews. The Copper Valley land grabbers became a cautionary tale, a black mark on the reputation of the development company Finch was associated with. The immediate aftermath on the ranch was a flurry of activity. The HOA, now under intense public and legal scrutiny, moved surprisingly quickly to comply with the judge's order. A crew arrived within days to break up and remove the concrete foundation. It was a messy, noisy process, and watching them haul away the chunks of concrete felt incredibly satisfying. Repairing the irrigation system was more complicated. The damage was extensive, requiring new pipe and professional help to ensure the system was fully functional again. Earl's temporary line remained in place until the permanent repairs were complete, a constant reminder of the kindness and support of my neighbors. The fake code violation notices stopped arriving. The anonymous threats dwindled and eventually ceased. The constant feeling of being watched, of waiting for the next attack, slowly began to dissipate. But the experience left its mark. I became more vigilant, more aware of the potential for outside forces to disrupt my life. I joined the local Ranchers Association and became an advocate for property rights. I spoke at community meetings, sharing my story and encouraging others to be informed and involved in local issues. Benji and I continued to work together on the criminal case. The district attorney's office took the judge's referral seriously. Finch and several other HOA board members were indicted on charges of fraud and conspiracy. The legal process was slow, but the wheels of justice were turning. Life on the ranch settled back into a rhythm dictated by the seasons and the needs of the cattle. The pasture, once scarred by the unwanted foundation, slowly began to heal. Grass grew over the disturbed earth, and the cattle returned to grazing in that area. The temporary irrigation line was eventually removed, leaving no trace of the emergency it had served. One evening, several months after the court ruling, I was out in the pasture, checking the fence line. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and sagebrush. I paused by the spot where the foundation had been. Now it was just a patch of slightly greener grass, a faint scar on the landscape. I thought about everything that had happened, the initial shock, the fear, the anger, the exhaustion, and finally the victory. I thought about the support of my neighbors, the dedication of my lawyer, the power of standing up for what you believe in. It hadn't been easy. There were times when I felt completely overwhelmed, when the pressure seemed insurmountable. But I had held on. I had refused to be intimidated, to be bought off, to be driven from my home. Looking out at the vast expanse of my land, the land my family had worked for generations, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The fight had been hard, but it had been worth it. My land was safe. My home was secure. And the community that had rallied around me was stronger than ever. The setting sun painted the sky in vibrant hues, a breathtaking display of nature's enduring beauty. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, I knew with a quiet, deep-seated certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, my stow,